thing that I do is the easiest question of all day. I just need to get your first and last name and the correct spelling of it so I can set my audio levels.
My name is Emily Earhart, Airhart.
And is that a maiden name or a married name?
Married name.
And what was your maiden name?
Davidson, Davidson.
S-O-N. And which is real good. You started to tell me a little bit. So your parents homesteaded here?
My grandparents homesteaded
Oh, your
here.
grandparents?
Grandparents did, up the Wishkah. Yeah, in 1903 they came.
Wow. So, and you were born?
In Aberdeen, 1925, October 22nd.
October 22nd. So you've been here all your life?
Yep. Well, we did live in Tacoma for 3 years after we were married and came back home.
So what was it like as a child growing up here? Do you remember the Depression?
Not an awful lot, because everybody in the neighborhood was just about the same. My dad worked the whole time during the Depression, but we didn't have a lot of money. Mother always had a garden, and that.
What did your dad do?
He was a long-distance hauler, transfer man.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So in the early 20s, 30s, he was.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, he was actually. He did a lot of coal here for heat at that time. When he first got the job, I was hauling coal. But, yeah.
So gone a lot.
He was gone a lot. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what did Mom do?
Mom was at home. She was at home, and she was from a large family, and she was kind of the mother of the family, as you know, taking, when the other aunts had babies, they always came and stayed at our house, and during that, so she had gone and been in nurses training. In fact, my dad had worked in the woods before they were married, and he broke his leg and was taken to the hospital, and that's where Mother met him, and she had 6 months more to go on nurses training, but she quit and got married.
So it was your dad's fault.
Of course.
That she never finished.
Yeah.
And how many siblings do you have?
There was four girls and 2 boys. Yeah.
Boy, that's a pack.
It was a pack. And we fit kind of in a small house, but I must have been 10 or 12 before we built on more. They built more onto the house, and yeah.
And where do you fit in the?
I was number 4.
About the middle.
Yeah.
About right in the middle. Wow, that poor neglected middle child.
That's right.
So what do you remember? What are your memories of the harbor as a child?
Well, we didn't travel much because, I say, my dad was gone a lot, and so we didn't travel around a lot in town. We went up to Wishkah almost every weekend to help my grandparents on the farm and that, and that's what, and other aunts and cousins and that were gathered.
Did your mom drive?
She did for a while, but then she quit because she didn't have a car available most of the time, so my dad did most of the driving.
Was that rare at that time for a woman to be driving, or was it fairly common?
No, I don't think it was that rare, because if you could afford a car, you could drive. Yeah.
It's funny how that
Yeah.
works. So which schools did you go to then?
I went to Samuel Benn School on G Street. Yeah.
Are they still there?
No, that's gone. That's where right near where the high school is now, the new high school.
Oh, okay. And then so you graduated high school here?
Yes. Went to Miller Junior High and then on to Weatherwax, yeah.
Weatherwax. Now, it's gone, isn't it? Did it burn? No.
Yeah.
It burnt, but they built a new building.
Okay. Yeah. What do you remember Pearl Harbor, where you were?
Oh yes, I remember Pearl Harbor. I remember it coming over the radio, and I saw my mother's face, and it's a look I'll never forget. What terror she had. Yeah.
Did you have a concept of what was going on, or were you so young?
I was 16, so I knew what was going on. Yeah. And when we came was in high school, so the next morning when we came, there was the armory here was full of servicemen and the tanks out. Yeah.
What was that like? Boy, that must have.
It was scary. It brought you, realization very quick. Yeah.
So was it?
And so many of the fellows my age then went in the service. They were then early. Some of them waited until after they graduated, but they didn't all wait that long.
How was that, having these young men go away?
Well, yeah, there was, well, my two brothers went, or of course, one was in, two were just older than I am, so they went before. They graduated in 40 and 42, so they both went in the service, yeah.
Did they sign up or were they drafted?
No, they signed up. They didn't wait to be drafted.
Do you remember what that was like? I mean,
yeah, because it really affected my dad. My dad had real emotional problems from that, and partly both the boys leaving, and yeah, it was hard for him and for the family. And we just lost my sister in 1941, and so having all the three or older ones gone, yeah, that was hard.
What did you lose your sister from?
She had rheumatic fever. She died at 21, so it was there in 1941, so it was a hard year for the family.
It's interesting, now this is chauvinist of me, but it seems like it would have affected your mom more than your dad.
I think in some ways she was more stable. She was the tough one in the whole family. As I say, she was the one that kind of mothered the rest of her family, because she was one of 11 children, so yeah.
She could.
Yep.
She ruled the roost.
Yes, she did.
What's your heritage?
Polish and Scottish.
Oh. Mm-hmm. On which side?
My mother was Polish, my dad was Scot. Yeah.
And with your dad being gone so much, your mom raising the kids?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But she had a good sense of humor. She was and loved music. I know a couple of the kids from the neighborhood would say, "I remember how your mother whistled. What a beautiful, how she could whistle, and you could hear her all over the neighborhood."
So tunes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. What was there? Did you live in a Polish community?
No. We just lived on the outside of, in the city limits, just in North Aberdeen, going out to Wishkah, yeah.
Because I didn't realize that we had just interviewed Peggy, is that right, Peggy? Beritage, and she was telling about the Italian community and all that, and I didn't realize that down here there were these different...
There was a Polish community, was further up the Wishkah. There was a lot of Polish families up there.
But you lived not within a neighborhood, yeah. What, when your brothers signed up, did they both leave at the same time?
No, they didn't.
Did you go with them when they left, or
no? They as I remember, they just signed up, and the older ones they left earlier, and then yeah. So,
that had to be hard. I mean, on the whole family, that had to be hard.
It was very hard, yeah.
Did you stay in touch with them?
Oh yes, the one brother came home on leave, but the other one, the second one, once he left, he went to training camp, and he never got back until the war was over.
What about correspondence with them, letters?
Oh yeah, we corresponded with them all the time, yeah.
Do you remember what types of things you would write to them?
My mother did more of the writing than we did. Yeah, but we were very faithful, yeah.
What about letters you got from them? What type of things did they tell you?
Oh, they were telling somewhat about their training they had. One brother was in engineering and spent a lot of time here in the States going to school, but then ended up in Japan. And the other one was in the Air Force, and then he ended up on Ascension Island off of Brazil in radio.
And for you back home, what was life like during the war? What changed?
Well, the one you think of is the rationing was a real headache, although we always had a garden, and I can't ever remember wanting for that much, except for shoes and other sugar and that type of thing, yeah. But,
So shoes were in short supply?
Sure, well, yes, yeah.
What about school? Did it change at all? I mean, did you have to, the way they taught, or the things that you had, or?
I can't remember that it changed a lot in that.
What about dances? Do they have dances? Well,
Oh, they had them, but they say I wasn't that into that type of thing. I was more shy, very shy.
So you didn't know whether there were available guys or not? Because I heard a lot of places that so many of the young men were off to war that it was...
Well, that's true. Of course, let's see, no, it would have been later. I did start dating my husband in 42, and then he left and went to school in Oregon, and then on into the service. So, yeah.
Where did you meet your husband?
In high school.
From here?
Yeah.
And his name?
Leonard Airhart.
Leonard. Mm-hmm. And so he went to college or went in the service?
He went into Eugene and took some aircraft training, and then joined the Navy and went into the Naval Air.
And where did he go?
He ended up to Norman, Oklahoma, and in training there, and then ended up in Hawaii.
He was with my dad in Norman.
Really?
Yeah, my dad was there. My dad was there right at the end of the war. Yeah. Got washed. Every program they'd start, they'd wash out. I have a record from him that he sent back from there. Recorded a record and sent it back. You know, hi, Muddy, I'm here. So, did you get married young then? Or did you?
No, I was 20 when we were married, after he got out of the service.
Oh, okay, so you met in high school, he
Yeah.
went away. Were you serious while he was gone, or?
Off and on, and then, yeah, towards before he came home, then we got much more serious with it, yeah.
So you were steadies, though, while he was?
Not completely, not the whole time, because I didn't think it was fair to him for just to be gone, so.
So did you two keep in?
We kept in touch, yeah.
And what types of things would you write in? I don't need to get too personal, but...
Well, there really wasn't a lot of excitement to write about, you know. Yeah, you go here, or you went to the show, or you did this, or whatever. I did a lot of showing by myself, movies. The neighbor girl and I went to them a lot, too. So.
And which theater would you go to?
Well, there were such good choices. The Aberdeen, and the DNR, and the Roxy, and the Weir. Bijou, that's right, the Bijou, too.
So you had really quite a few choices down here. Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of the movies that you would have gone to at that time?
No, I don't. None of them stand out. Of course, anything with, I'm not going to be able to think of it. His name, Gary Cooper. Anything with Gary Cooper was a good movie. I've got to tell you this one story. I went to the Weir Theater one night by myself. And I thought, oh, I'll buy myself a candy bar. And I bought a Mr. Good bar. And I went in the movie and I ate part of it. I just didn't quite taste quite right, so I just put it in my pocket. And when I went out and looked at it, it was full of maggots. This is how old the candy was in these theaters. I didn't like Mr. Good bars for a long time.
How much did a Mr. Good bar cost at that time?
Oh, I can't remember that.
They didn't charge you extra for it.
I charged extra for the protein.
A lot less than today, I would assume.
Oh, yes. And they were bigger.
Yeah.
Oh.
And better chocolate, too. Do you remember any music of that era that you listened to? What?
Oh, I can definitely sing you most of the good old war songs. Yeah, a lot of them.
Patriotic Family?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Were there, so did your family have lots of relatives in the area too, besides your siblings? Or?
Oh, yes. Yeah, my mother's family all lived close. In fact, one uncle lived just a block and a half away, and the other ones were close in town. Two other ones in town, and yeah.
So were there other cousins?
Oh, yeah. We've got a large family of cousins.
Did any go in the service too?
Oh, yeah. A lot of them went in the service.
Well, do you remember your mom talking? Because you said it was real hard on your dad. How did your mom deal with the two brothers? Correct.
Two brothers. I don't know how personal you want me to get here. We had some acreage there. We lived inside the city limits, but we had acreage that we'd bought. And she went out there and she worked and she cleared brush. This is what kept her. She worked and cleared brush, and of course, the girls that were left went down and helped her and burned brush and cleared brush. That's how we spent summers. Yeah.
And you think for your mom that was her distraction?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was.
Stoic family? Was
Oh,
it?
yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how different times are. I mean, now people just talk about everything and anything. Sometimes like way too much information.
Is that where you live today?
Yes.
What goes through your mind? Every once in a while, do you go out there and
I think
do you remember?
it makes, you know what, it makes me sad when I think about, because we have not been able to keep this area clean, and I think how hard my mother worked to clear that. And now it's back to, well, a power line goes under it, so you don't, but yeah. Yeah, it makes me sad to think how hard she worked. She taught me how to not ride on the crosscut saw. Quit riding.
Were they different? Was that generation different, you think?
Oh yes, I think if some of these kids nowadays had to really, if they lost everything and had to go, they wouldn't know where to begin. They wouldn't begin to know how to start a garden or anything, or to build, you know, wood or a shelter or anything.
Because I assume your mom raised the kids, planted the garden,
Oh,
cooked
yes.
the meals.
Oh yes.
Now,
Sewed.
She never went to nursing, right? She finished. I mean, she didn't.
No,
continue.
she never did worked as a nurse.
So so yeah, sewed.
Yeah.
So did you have?
And baked. She was a great baker.
See, so how did they have the time?
Well, I even think, since I'm so involved in this Women of Grace Harbor project, you think of how these women and how they lived, and they still took time to write. They wrote down their memories, and that's what we have today, and it's wonderful.
How did they do it, do you think, though?
Well, they didn't have television. Yeah. And that was they had to make their own entertainment. Yeah.
I never thought about that. So let's say somebody tonight watches an hour and a half of TV, if you'd spend an hour and a half writing.
My mother only went through the 8th grade, but she never stopped learning. She was a great reader and did a lot of reading, wrote poetry.
Yeah. And today you say somebody didn't go through the 8th grade, they kind of looked at it as a put down, but I would assume your mother was a very intelligent woman.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Did she make most of her meals from scratch?
There was no other way. No, I can't remember ever having a box of anything. I don't think she ever used Bisquick even. Yeah.
So that's one of the, as I look at this, one of the hard things to understand. Today everybody says, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
We have to work less because so many things are, you know, even removing the brush that you described, your mom probably out doing by hand. Today,
That's right.
come in with a little tractor and a tiller, and but we say we don't have enough time. So I wonder how that generation fit it all in and worked so hard. Focus?
I guess, just, yeah.
Did they instill that in you, that work?
I'm told it's true. I know my sister tells me, she doesn't know how I keep going. I said, well, it's just interesting what we do, so that's why we keep doing it.
Now, have you lived here all your life, or did you leave for a while and come back?
We left for 3 years and lived in Tacoma after we were married. And weren't making much money then, so we got a chance. He got a little higher paying job, so moved back down here. So.
And so did you stay in the house all your life, or did you go out in the working environment? Or?
I went to work as a part-time teacher's aide when our youngest was in the 2nd grade. So, and then I worked 20-some years as a teacher's aide.
Wow.
But this was a job where I was home during the summer when the kids were home. And when they got home from school, I was home from school. So it wasn't. Yeah.
Has it changed for women, do you think, because of World War II? I mean, what you can or can't do, or?
Well, yes. After my dad got sick, my mother went to work in the chair factory, and she worked in the chair factory for quite a few years. That would have been, oh boy, Must have been about 1949 when she went to work then, yeah. But yeah, there wasn't jobs for women back at her. There were some, you know, that nursing and this and that, but housekeeping, that, but
Was it socially acceptable for your mom to work, or
oh yeah, there was.
Oh, it was at that.
Well, yeah, at that time, because there were so many of them that worked at Boeing's and that here that went to work. In fact, that's where I worked, at Boeing's, after I got out of high school. Worked at the Boeing plant in Holcomb.
Was that while the war was going on? Or?
Oh yes,
So what were you doing there?
building the tail gunner section, working on that of the B-17.
So where was the Boeing plant down here?
Where was it? It was in Holcomb, right close to where the Y was the old Y. It was right across from the library and the Elks Club, right down in there is where I worked.
So was it a facility built specifically?
Oh no, it was just a renovated building that they used and had
During the war time?
during the war. Mhm.
So take me through your job and how they trained you for it. What was a day like?
It wasn't an awful lot of training we had. I worked with other men that were more adaptable. So a lot of ours was cleaning. I was called a man. Here I go. Mechanic, but it wasn't much mechanic work to it. They would fit the skin to the frame of the aircraft, and then we would clean it and put a putty on it, then fit the skin back on and screw it back in place, and then the riveters would rivet it in place.
So it was the complete plane was done down here?
No, just the tail gunner section.
Just the tail gun, and then they shipped it off?
That's right.
Did they train it out, put it on a train, or do you remember how they?
I don't remember. I'm thinking it was by truck. I don't know for sure.
So how did you get the job? Do you remember?
Went over and applied. It wasn't difficult at all. Yeah.
Were the women accepted down here? In the
Oh
plant?
yes, there was. I would say a good 80% of the crew were women at that time.
I interviewed one woman who had worked for Boeing's up in Seattle, and the first week they kept telling her to go get the left-handed screwdriver. So, you know, they're always playing the tricks and picking on them, but it was there were very few places, actually more in the service, where I heard of the discrimination than there was in the plants, in the working plants. I didn't hear as much. They were glad to have them there.
Most of the men that worked in the plant were older. And there was a couple of younger men, but not very. There were just two that I can think of. Yeah.
Did you work 5 days a week, 6 days a week? Do you remember?
We worked 6 days a week, most of the time. Yeah.
Do you remember what pay was like, or?
It wasn't much, but I can't remember what it was. But
Was that your first job?
no, I'd worked at the chair factory for a while. I had the chair factory here. I worked in the sanding department.
So which did you like better?
Well, we were making chairs, and I worked in where they were sanding the seats, and the seats would be put through a machine, the flat part, and then the edges had to be sanded, and so you'd use a sanding belt that was vertical, and sand the edges of the chair seats in.
Was there a sense of pride when you were working at the Boeing plant, or was it just a job? I mean, did you connect it?
No, there was a sense of pride, definitely, yeah. Because a lot of the girls, their husbands were in the service, and so it was definitely a sense of pride there.
Would that be the lunchtime chatter sometimes?
Oh yeah. Sure. Have you heard from this one or this one, or yeah.
What did you have to wear for special?
We had to have our hair tied up completely covered. So if you were bald, it wouldn't have made any difference. So it was a kerchief that we would tie up and then bring the front down over, so your forehead was covered too there. Yeah.
So
In other words, the jeans and that. Yeah.
So then the traditional, what we see the picture of Rosie the Riveter.
Very definitely Rosie.
So did they tell you how to actually wear it, or they just said cover
No,
it?
it seems to me that you went in there and they showed you how to do it. The other girls or something there, yeah.
And then jeans and...
Jeans, yeah. No particular other uniform part.
Was that new for women wearing pants?
Oh, yeah.
And do you
Because
think...
I can't remember. No, I don't think I ever wore pants to high school. I know I didn't. Yeah. Cold days or not, you went with your skirts.
It's interesting to see the changes. I mean, to when you go back and, for me, you were there, but to go back and see photos, and that's it, to see dresses, no matter what the weather was, it's like, well, it's not a convenient...
Yeah.
I just talked to a woman in Alabama who was a Rosie the Riveter, and they have a group, the national group that gets together, and she said that it's interesting because when they get together, it's really, because the daughter's gonna come too, but you can pick the Rosies out because most of the Rosies have pantsuits on. So, and it's just hung on so long in that way, and you can, the dresses, you go, probably wasn't Rosie, you know, so.
Yeah.
How long did you work for Boeing's?
I worked until right after when the war ended. And then, yeah, and then, well, let's see. We were married in January of 1946. Pardon me, February of 46. Don't tell me my February 46.
That was the other boyfriend you were thinking of.
No, he came home in January, and so then we were married in February.
We'll go with that story. We'll stick with that one. You did good, though. I have a good friend that I interviewed, Newbie, who was from the Raymond area, and he got all done, and then he called me the next day. He says, "I forgot one thing. I never mentioned my wife." I'm like, "Oh, poor Don." And he never gets to live that down. I call his wife all the time. So you continued on, and then you quit on your own when you got married. Versus end of the war. Here's your paycheck.
Yeah.
Do you remember the end of the war?
Well, sure. The other thing, of course, when Roosevelt died, that was a real time of, we had the time of silence during the working there at the plant. And the end of the war, that was a happy time.
How did you hear about it, and what was it like down here?
It was over the radio. You listened to the radio. Yeah. I think it was an uplifting time for everybody because you could find it, and things were going to hopefully get better quick.
Is there? Can you? I mean, we have a different war going on today, but I'm thinking more economically. Can you compare that era to this era economically?
I don't know. There were jobs available then. As I say, the women and that there were jobs and when the men came back, some of them had harder time getting jobs. In fact, my husband was said, when he left in the service, that he would have this job at McCord Field. Well, when he went there, and that is the job he'd been promised, of course, was not there. So he took another job there and at a very low pay. He can tell you how much it was. I can't remember, but yeah.
So he did his duty for the country, had been promised a job, and when he got back,
It wasn't this. He wanted a job in aviation. He ended up in warehouse. So,
what did he do after the service?
Well, he worked in the warehouse there for a while, and then he got another job in a hardware warehouse in Tacoma. And then he got a chance for a better paying job in Aberdeen, so we moved back to Aberdeen. And we've been here since.
Do you think we learned anything from World War II? Did it change the world?
Obviously not. Not the things that were important. I think if there were, personal thing, I think if there were a few more women at the head of governments, there wouldn't be as many wars as we've had. That's just my personal opinion.
That's a consistent one here today. Aunt Betty that I interviewed earlier.
Oh, yes.
Same thing, talking about that. Do you think because of compassion?
I think so. I think in some ways women are they can consider the other side or something and are willing to give a little more, not to be so, pride that has to come first in that.
It's interesting because I know that women are left and right brain, that women that have strokes can rehab quicker because they use both sides of their brain and it will compensate. Where men, we're very one-sided, and they say that rehabbing from a stroke is much more difficult for men because of that. So, it's interesting. I think compassion needs to be there to make things.
Well, you need to think back, the years of gold of my era was there, and things were certainly different in the Near East then.
And this is a hard one, it's a pretty broad question, but how much has the world changed, do you think, from when you were a child compared to what the young girls of today face?
I don't think there's hardly any measurement on it. Both of my daughters, well, two of our oldest daughters both went through college and went into business. One for the phone company and one was into humanities and that. And our son ended up getting his several degrees and that. The one daughter's the one that, still a very intelligent girl, but did not, through her pattern, she didn't attend college and that, but went into business and such for herself and that. But some of the kids now, and it's so hard, it's almost like there's those that are so dedicated, no matter what, they're going to do it. And there's these others, and there's so many in between that, it's...
Do you think that's different today? I mean, if you were to take the ratios.
Probably not actually there. Those who are dedicated and have their goals set in the right direction, they're going to get there, no matter how many obstacles you put in their way.
It's interesting because I'm 52 now. I'm getting at that point where I say, well, as a kid, we did, and I've tried to really figure: do we romanticize our past, or were the times really simpler? To me, I look back and I think they really were simpler. I think communities were closer.
Oh, yes. How many of you talk about some people and they say, right where we live, we know the neighbors, but they don't know their neighbors. Across the street or on either side, they don't know them.
Where when you were a young girl growing up here in the harbor,
we knew the whole neighborhood. And it was different. I mean, even when I was younger, we would go out and we'd play football or baseball, and all the kids, no matter of your age, if they were high school kids down through grade school, we all played in the same ball game. Of course, we played in the outfield an awful lot because this workup wasn't real fair, but yeah.
And I'll bet you if you were downtown and being a smart aleck that they knew whose daughter you were, and by the time you got home, you were probably...
Yeah. But no, as I say, I don't think it's... And the other thing that I think is too bad is I think about Boy Scouting, how it has changed just in the recent years, how few boys are in Scouting now, and what an important thing that was.
It's I see there's an astronomical amount of Boy Scouts that have become astronauts, and there was something else. I mean, it was real impressive when you saw the number of the Eagle Scouts that went on.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a message for the future generations that should come out of World War II? What we need to tell them so that they don't forget history, they don't let...
A message. there's probably the message is there, but are they ready to listen? I don't know, you think, I've still got the yellow flags hanging on my dogwood tree at home. It's just, I don't have any. I had a nephew that was in the service and that, but that's the only one, but it's still. And when I see on the television these 21, 24-year-old kids dying, and it just does not seem right.
It's hard because I promised that whenever I saw one in the paper, I would stop and read the full article to pay respect for that young man or woman that, and I know over time I've slid away from it, you know, where I keep trying to focus back.
There's too many. There's been so many, and you would think, and you see those that have survived, but how their bodies are, what condition, it's just sad.
During World War II, were there some that came back here that had been wounded?
Yes, but I don't think they were. I think they're saving kids now that they could never save back then. And through the magic of surgery and medicine.
I think one of your most powerful statements that you made was, I think there's a message, but are they ready
To listen. Oh.
Because I know with, I had a fascinating interview that I did of a father, and I'd asked his daughter if I could interview his dad. Well, my dad doesn't want to talk about it. He's still PTSD. And when I finally talked to him, he said, yeah, I talk about it, but nobody's interested in listening. Because he remembered his kids as little children. You know, well, when you're 5 and 6, it meant nothing.
Nothing, no.
And they had gone on that way thinking, I don't want to tell them, they don't want to hear. And finally there was this coming together, and they were ready to listen.
Listen.
Yeah.
And remember.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Well, it wasn't near as painful as I thought it might be.
I have it tied down.